Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons, and welcome to an entirely new series of reviews, video essays. I'm not entirely sure what to call these just yet, but starting next month I will be producing these on the regular, alternating between focusing on something Eurovision and something video game related, so I'm thinking maybe do 2 per month, 1 Eurovision, 1 video game related. And don't worry, this isn't replacing anything that I currently do, it's just a little something extra that I'm trying out, so think of this as a pilot episode. If you like it enough, then I'll know this is something worth sticking with, and I would like to give it an honest try, so do let me know what you think down in the comments below. But I'll go into more detail about this whole arrangement at the end of the video. For now, well, let's get started! So, for this very first episode of what I hope will be many, I thought I'd treat myself and take a look at what many consider to be my favourite Eurovision country of them all, the most serene Republic of San Marino, or Little Soon Moo as I like to call them. I want to pat them on the head and pinch their cheeks. They're my sort of pet country where I will compliment them and tell them how much it looks like they've grown. I'm like their overly affectionate puppy of an uncle. Is it weird that I have a pet name for an entire country? I mean, they're not the only ones, but still. Right. San Marino, fast facts. Their national broadcaster is SMRTV, their present head of delegation is a Mr. Alessandro Capicchioni. I've spoken to him in person before, he's a lovely chap, he is as much of a cinnamon roll as the country he represents. And Microstate joined the contest in 2008. They dropped out for a couple of years, then they came back in a blaze of non-startery in 2011, and have stuck with the contest ever since. Their best placing came in 2014, which, as of the recording of this video, remains their only qualification for the final ever. Here's hoping that changes soon. They also joined Junior Eurovision in 2013 and stayed for a sum total of 3 contests and then left after the 2015 edition. Tragically, their best placing was on their debut, and that was a disappointing 10th place in a field of 12. Or, well, I mean, that's debatable if you go on placing versus points. Well, if it's any consolation, they did get their first Junior 12 points and out loud recognition on the scoreboard in 2015, so it's something?
Go to San Marino!
And they tried their hand at the Eurovision Young Musicians in 2016, but since they didn't finish in the top 3, we have literally no way of knowing how they fared there. Now, San Marino have made a bit of a name for themselves as Eurovision's greatest underdog since Andorra left the party in 2009, or Monaco after 2006, or Luxembourg after 1993, I'm not picky. In fact, come to think of it, there's a bit of a weird pattern emerging here. Microstates that join Eurovision achieve less than enviable results and then pull out. I'd like to say that Sumu are going to tough it out until things get better, but the most recent rumblings from up on high in La Serenissima Repubblica do have me a little bit worried. So here's the thing. Much like Andorra before them, and Monaco before that, okay, well, actually, Andorra and Monaco coexisted for 3 years there, but whatever, San Marino have the unfortunate habit of just kind of doing whatever when it comes to Eurovision. That's not to say their decisions aren't calculated, of course, but they do seem to lack that X factor. And that, in turn, isn't to discredit their 8 adult contest entries to date by any means. There's a time and a place for enjoying each and every one of them, and I will defend all of them. Most of them. Their problem seems to be that their song choices are just a little bit out of touch, a little bit out of whack with what Europe wants to hear, or at least that's what their results would have you believe. To be honest, that's not entirely inaccurate, given their proclivity to sending songs composed by Ralph Siegel. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the guy personally, but as far as most Eurovision fans are concerned, his name is sort of the kiss of death to any song. It might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if it's got his name on it, people will call it dated before they've even heard the first note. I mean, that literally happened in 2015. So, is it just that Little Soon Moo is so far out of the loop that they're just doing what they know used to work way back when? Do they really think that this is what it takes to turn heads on Europe's greatest stage in the present day? Well, no, actually. In December of last year, I had the privilege of talking to Signor Capicchioni myself, to the tune of a roughly half-hour interview for a university project, and he did say one thing in particular within that really caught my attention.
When it's up to smaller countries, you have to convince people first that you're not doing something terribly small. And then if they're convinced of that, they maybe make the next step and say, oh, this could be as nice as Germany, or as good as Norway. And that's the reason, I think, why for smaller countries, it's more difficult than for bigger ones.
So he knows his country does already have hurdles to overcome in terms of song choice, But if that's the case, then perhaps we should spend a moment looking back before we start looking forwards. Perhaps we can spot a pattern and then work towards a solution from there. Maybe that'll be what it takes to make everyone happy. So, where do we begin? First up, let's start with the most obvious pattern we can look for. What sort of people does SMRTV usually turn to when it comes to organising their Eurovision act? Well, there isn't a hard and fast rule by any means, and they do switch it up every now and then, but of the 8 entries that San Marino has sent to the adult contest, 5 of them were written by Ralph Siegel. That's 62.5% if you like statistics like that. And of those 5, 4 were performed by Eurovision's queen, darling and sweetheart, the legendary Valentina Monetta, one of the only artists to ever represent their country 3 times in a row. And then she had the energy to come back a 4th time in 2017 as well. Well, that's all well and lovely, but how about we turn that little factoid on its head? So, 4 of Siegel's 5 San Marino songs were performed by Valentina Monetta. That means that all 4 of Valentina's Eurovision entries were written by Ralph Siegel, and as I've said, Eurofans tend not to like his name all that much. That does mean that also, as an artist, she gets typecast. In their minds, she's a Siegel-only artist, and that can never change. So that means that, in their eyes, if San Marino sends Valentina, that means they're automatically doing something out of the loop. But trust me, Valentina's so much more than that. Check out her other music if you do get the chance. She's an excellent jazz artist. So anyway, that's a problem unto itself, but also consider that she's represented her country 4 times. That does take some serious dedication on her part, and that's to be admired. But remember, that's literally half of San Marino's entries in the contest's entire history. I see it as dedication, sure, but a lot of fans will begin to label her San Marino's only singer, and, well, actually they already have, they were doing that by 2014, and honestly, the way her presence at the contest has been structured, it almost feels like we've been choreographed to feel that way. In 2012, she was a comparative unknown who, unless I've been misinformed, was actually brought in to sing the Social Network song relatively last minute when another singer backed out, so naturally 2013 would feel like her true debut. It's not unheard of for singers to take part 2 years on the bounce. I mean, look at Jedward. On second thoughts, don't look directly at Jedward, it'll only encourage them and you'll hurt your eyes. So that's fine and dandy. Chris Halliday was an excellent song, and it received a lot of hype. Then she returned in 2014. Sure, that was her most successful outing to date, as well as San Marino's as a whole, but at that point, by being so omnipresent, avid fans of the contest were starting to see a pattern, and not even in an innocuous way, like the sort of way where they'd post a really sarcastic tweet with like 5 of those passive-aggressive thinking emoji in a row. And then Valmo left the scene, supposedly forever, with a statement that she'd moved on. Yeah, the fact that she decided to renege on that in 2017 sort of made it all seem, well, less than flattering for everyone involved. It was a thrill to those of us who appreciate her stylings, sure, but most fans won't have seen it in a positive light at all, especially with it being another Ralph Siegel entry, so all of the patterns are kept alive, and so people default to assuming that it's just another, oh, San Marino's just sending something that's out of touch. So that's a bit unfortunate. But alright, so let's bring the psychoanalytical train of negativity to a stop for a second, put a pin in it, save it for later. Before we go any further into the territory of sounding like I'm severely bashing one of my favourite Eurovision countries, let's take a step back and ask why. We know that SMRTV are aware of the holes in their strategies, and we know that, much as we love some of Sunmu's icons and general mimetic status within the Euro bubble, it is causing them some level of damage as far as their reputation goes. So why do they do it? On the basis level, I'd imagine that the answer is twofold. 1, who can they just reasonably approach? Who is out there that they could talk to? And 2, of those people, who can they ask who will say yes, knowing everything that they're signing themselves up for? So we've got Valentina, who has built herself up as a genuine ambassador for the tiny republic. People know her name, for better or for worse. If the right mood takes her, she may well accept the offer to participate again, and she's well within her rights to. And Ralph Siegel, he's been working with the contest for years, for decades. He's an icon unto himself. The thing is, according to some, his style of music hasn't kept up with that. But that's the thing. His reputation may precede him, and not in a good way, but he's likely to take any opportunity he's offered to keep taking part in Europe's favourite TV show, probably up until the day he dies, and even beyond that somehow. Yeah, they're gonna send Ralph Siegel from beyond the grave. Oh, that's almost poor taste. Huh. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mean to make these people sound desperate, because they're not. But Valentina and Ralph are both very easy targets for SMRTV because, well, they're highly likely to agree to participate. They've done the contest before, it's not their first rodeo, so they know what they're doing. They're getting a competent package who knows what they're doing. It's just that their reputation precedes them. Because artists who will agree to represent San Marino are kind of understandably a little thin on the ground out there, so they kind of have to take what they can get. Why do I say that's understandable? Well, number one, San Marino is a very small country, one of the smallest in Europe. That means that they're not going to have a very large pool of artists who were born there or grew up there full time, and artists from abroad might not even know that the country exists in the first place. Number two, San Marino has, as I keep saying, built up a reputation for itself at Eurovision in a less than favourable light, and as Signor Capicchioni has identified, on top of that, just by virtue of being a smaller, less successful country, anything they do will be scrutinised and heavily, and compared to anything a larger country does. See for reference for this video. And number three, once again, San Marino is a very small country. That means that even though it's a tax haven, there isn't a huge amount of money floating around in their economy, which means that as a broadcaster, SMRTV doesn't have a huge pool of resources to dip into to hire big-name composers or performers to represent them, and if they do happen to come across someone who might consider it, they have to slap them with a fair chunk of the participation fee, or else they won't be able to afford to take part in the first place. And here are two key examples of that. Firstly, let's cast our gaze across the Mediterranean to another country that, believe it or not, qualifies as a microstate, Cyprus. They've taken to signing contracts with Thomas Gierson early in the season each year to assure that they definitely have a competition-level song ready in time for May. More than once, in the comments under my reviews, I've seen the defense that, well, Cyprus doesn't have that many native composers on that level who are that familiar with Eurovision, so it's only fair that they get to hire out. Okay, fine, I can live with that. We can apply that logic to San Marino as well. And then secondly, there's the whole story with Arisa last year. You might well get to this point in the story and think, Tess, you've missed the obvious, why don't they just borrow from San Remo? That's full of successful popular artists who have plenty of cash to throw around. Well, that's where this train of thought is going. Arisa missed out on the chance to represent Italy in 2016, and in fact I think she won San Remo in 2014, the one year they didn't use San Remo to pick their artist, and so she offered her services to San Marino in 2016 instead. But she was turned away because they were dedicated to sending Serhat that year, and that's another story entirely. She was then approached in kind in 2017 because the position had opened up. But according to rumours, saying yes to that offer came with a rather lofty price tag of anywhere between 300 and 500,000 euros. Not even San Remo artists can afford to pay that much that easily. So, alright, shelf that for a second. Let's take a moment to consider what San Marino looks like when they're not following their usual patterns. The three key examples of this, in the adult contest anyway, are, well, the only examples of this: Mio Dio, Senate, and Serhat, so 2008, 2011, and 2016 respectively. And this is where things get tricky. Let's assume that those three entries are indicative of what sort of thing we could expect from San Marino every single year if they had the ability to ask anyone in the world and had no restrictions, no budget concerns, none of that. Does that mean it would solve every single one of their problems? Well, not really. But here's the problem. Even I'm not entirely sure why. It would be so easy to sweep more than half of their entries under the rug simply because they're Ziegel songs. It's not fair to do that, but that won't stop most people. Then what's wrong with what's left? Their debut entry, for instance, I thought was excellent. I still listen to it now, and yet it came last in its semi-final. The only thing I can think that it may have done wrong is perhaps it was too moody of a song? But then again, this was the year that saw Portugal's Senhora do Mar rocket to superstardom within the fandom, and that wasn't exactly a cheery pop song. Senate's Stand By from 2011 was a solid composition as well. It was a good track to chill out to, and Serhat, controversial though he was an absolutely commendable ambassador for San Marino, netting them their third highest placing in the contest ever, and generally being an all-round super nice guy, even when people were being immature and hypercritical of him. And I include myself in that statement. He was so gracious, he's a cinnamon roll, he really is. So what's the common thread here? All I can think of is, perhaps the songs were just out of touch with what people wanted to hear that year in one form or another. Perhaps Complice, despite its similarities to other songs in the form of tone and foreign languageness, was just too monotonous for some people? Perhaps Stand By was just too inoffensive to the point of forgettability for some? And then I Didn't Know, well, they did try, credit where it's due. SMRTV saw that the original mix was being critically panned across the board, and they tried to offer a version they thought people liked more. Alas, it seems they misinterpreted ironic likes for actual approbation, but then again it did come 12th in its semi-final, so let's not forget that it wasn't a total failure by any means. And then what of their junior competitors? Is that any different, bearing in mind Ralph Siegel hasn't even touched that? Well, although Michele Perniola's song wasn't too far off a higher placing in terms of points, perhaps what cost him those points was, again, comparative monotony, that the song had only one mode, so to speak, and it didn't break any new ground. I liked it, so it is hard for me to say. And perhaps the Peppermints were too vapid, perhaps they didn't make enough of an emotional connection with a song that was meant to tell a very personal story despite being split across many people. And as for Kamila Ismailova, she did get the country its first out-loud San Marino 12 points, bearing in mind San Marino have only been in one Eurovision final, not counting the junior contest, so it's not their first 12 ever, but it is their first 12 in a final. So she was clearly a step in the right direction, but I will concede, much as I love the song, her live performance left quite a bit to be desired. It wasn't the greatest. I suppose that means, really, that all San Marino really needs to get back in the saddle is a cash injection and a boost of morale. But as we've seen, unless it's on the massively huge scale of, like, Bulgaria, for example, that hardly guarantees them any success. And bear in mind, Bulgaria's funding comes from a collaboration between the national broadcaster and a private broadcaster who has that kind of cash to throw around. San Marino is a tiny country. They only have that one broadcaster really to turn to, so that money isn't going to come out of thin air. And for that matter, I don't want to tell them to get a new head of delegation either, because, well, Mr. Capicchioni is just, he's such a cinnamon roll. He kind of knows what he's doing. But getting a new head of delegation did work for France. Maybe they should give it a go, just for like 1 or 2 years, and then if that doesn't work out, then switch back. I don't want them to give up outright, though. That would be the worst possible outcome, because, I mean, you can't win a contest you're not taking part in, right? Now, at this point in each video in this series, I will assign a rank to whatever I'm talking about. Think of it like a grade on a school project or something. In the case of San Marino, I will admit this is very much on the border, so it's a terrible example for me to start the series off on, but since it really does sound like they're considering throwing in the towel for now, I will have to round down my first impressions and give them a rank D. Because they are trying their best, but they need to step up. I would love to offer some quick and easy, wet and wild, fast and loose solution to all their problems, but the truth is, I'm not really qualified to be the one to call those shots here. I don't know the specifics of what's going on behind closed doors at SMRTV, so all I can do is offer broad advice based on my research. For now, that advice is, try to find a source of income that will allow them to go bigger and bolder in their artist and song selections. Look to other countries who have recently turned their fortunes around, namely the aforementioned Bulgaria and France, and don't just plump for the first respondent who says yes. At this point, another Ralph Siegel song or another appearance from Valentina Monetta would do much more harm than good, and that's entirely down to how it would be received by fans. In short, they've got a serious mold they need to break at this point, and when they get it right, it is going to show in a big, big way. They will put themselves on the map, but they need to put the time in. I just want to see the evidence that that is in the pipeline. They're working hard, they need to work harder, but I admit that may not be possible unless they get that extra load of cash, if they get some investment from outside, perhaps some outside influence who can help them, but I love San Marino, I really do, but they don't make it easy to do. It's a hard knock life for this microstate, it seems, but hey, maybe the sun will come out tomorrow? I don't know when this turned into a musical parody. San Marino, anyone? Anyway, that's it for this review, video, essay, whatever you want to call it. Thanks indeed for watching, and do let me know what you think of this format. What would you change? What would you keep? What do you like? What do you not like so much? If you want to see more of it, I am producing this series long-term over on Patreon. For the moment, anything I produce for that will stay exclusive for at least a month, subject to change, before I upload it to YouTube. So if you want to get ahead on these videos, patreon.com/TessHex is the way to go. As is tradition, there are additional perks depending on your pledge, including shoutouts, input on future videos, your name in the credits, and other mystery goodness, plus the extra little hee of knowing that you're supporting me and helping these videos happen at all. For now though, I have been, and will continue to be, Tessellating Hexagons, and I will see you when next I see you. Thanks for watching.